we actually had somebody submit a question. So user flies on a wall asked, is it clear today whether 5-point controls can have POAMs or not, or are they must pass without a POAM? So can they be put on a POAM? Is there a determination that has already happened or is forecasted to happen to define the 5 and 3-point controls? Also, if or how the DoD will use scores in the source selection process when competing for contracts. If it's not determined today and planned, is there an ETA? So it's really like 3 questions in one question, right?
Yeah, I was surprised you didn't take a breath there. It definitely pieced a few together. There is some definitive answers to some of these parts of the question, some of the elements of the question, and some of them I'm going to defer to you on. But when it comes down to it, actually, I just completed my CCP training, and this is a foundational piece of the CCP training: the breakdown of the framework and the DoD assessment methodology and the scoring that is associated with it, and then picking which one of these can be put on limited deficiency, right? So short-term remediation, the 90 days or the 180-day POAM that's attached to your assessment.
And just to clarify, the POAM, POAM, is an acronym that stands for Plan of Action and Milestones. The verbiage that CMMC uses is a limited deficiency time or limited deficiency plan, limited deficiency items, I think is the language that they use. POAM, limited deficiency, basically things you haven't fully implemented and you have a plan for implementing. So the question is that of the requirements that are weighted at 5 points or 3 points under the DoD assessment methodology weighting system, will the 5-point controls be allowed to be put on a plan for implementation, or do you have to have them all implemented? No plans for implementation allowed.
And so the answer to that is if it's 5 points, with the exception of one control, it cannot be placed on the plan of action and milestone. Right. It is a assessment stopper, so to say. Apparently, or not apparently, but according to the assessment methodology that's being used in the CMMC certified assessment process guide, CMMC assessment process guide.
Right. You already passed the test. It doesn't matter now.
And inside, yeah, right. I'm already past my threshold. But inside there, it actually lists the controls that can be put on limited deficiency. And for the most part, with the exception of the 1 5-point control, which do you know what it is?
It's isn't it FIPS encryption?
It is.
It's got a little asterisk next to it where if you're using encryption, you get 3 points. If you're using FIPS validated crypto, you get 5 points. And that's really kind of the only wiggle room that you have. If you have any of the other 5-point controls on a POAM, you are not getting a certification under CMMC.
Or if the FIPS validated encryption, the certification for that encryption module is out of date. It's exceeded its expiration date, and it's in the process of recertification. It's one of those limited deficiency things. But for the most part, everything that you see within the DoD assessment methodology and the things that are allowed in the plan of action and milestone report are 1-point controls. So they have 1-point value attached to them, and they're listed out within, I know they're definitely listed out multiple times in my CCP training materials that I had to use.
Well, and so I guess not a better question, but a different way of asking the question is, based off what we know today, what is allowed to be on a POAM? Because famously, under CMMC 1.0, there were no POAMs allowed. You had to have 100% implementation across the board. And one of the big changes under CMMC 2.0 was the allowance and existence of POAMable requirements, requirements that could be put on a plan for remediation under a limited deficiency timeline, right? And according to the CAP and according to everything that we've heard from DoD, only a small sliver of the 1-point controls would be allowed to be placed on a POAM, because the 5-point controls and the 3-point controls are not allowed to be on a POAM. And you have to have, according to the current version of the CAP, I think it's 88% implemented, which when you do the math ends up only being a handful of 1-point controls able to be on a plan of action and milestones. Now, the big caveat there that the DoD will always give you is everything will be clarified via rulemaking. So what we take in the cap, this language around 5 points and 3 points and 1 points and what's allowed to be on a POAM or not, is going to be finally and ultimately sort of clarified via the rulemaking, but it is a very good preview of what's in the rule. It seems, even though the cap is a draft document, and even though the cap is published by the AB, it has DoD's fingerprints all over it. And they won't say which parts the DoD wrote and which parts the AB wrote, but it seems very, very specific and very odd that they are so precise about which controls and which percentage of controls are allowed to be on a POAM or not. So your initial reference flies on a wall is look at the draft cap from the AB and be familiar with what those 5, 3, and 1 point controls are from the DoD assessment methodology process.